This week we are covering remote administration. This video is actually a short and condensed version of what was covered in class, just to go over the highlights and also just to go through the functions kind of directly instead of waiting for everybody to sort of follow along and dealing with technical issues. So the first thing we want to do is use our Ubuntu server guide, and we're with chapter 6, remote administration. There are many ways to remotely administer the Linux server. This chapter will cover two of the most popular ways. It talks about OpenSSH and Puppet. We won't really be covering Puppet, and we'll look at reasons why when we get to there, but we will be looking at one other web-based remote administration by looking at another tool that's also covered in this chapter. We'll be covering it a little bit differently though later on. OpenSSH, this section of the server guide introduces a powerful collection of tools for remote control of and transfer of data between network computers called OpenSSH. Learn about some of the configuration settings possible with OpenSSH and how to change them. We'll look at them, but we won't actually change them. The point of today is really just to make that remote connection very simple. You can always configure them and make it more secure, change the ports, whatever you want to do for those settings, but right now it's just a real simple, very easy remote access. There's both a server component and a client component. The server component, SSHD, which is the daemon, listens continually for client connections from any of the client tools. When a connection request occurs, it sets the correct connection depending on the type, and so on. So looking at the server installation, or the installation of the software, we see that there is a client part that needs to get installed on the client computer and a server part that needs to get installed on the server part. We're going to concentrate on the server side. I'm going to go ahead and log on to my server. Paul B and password. And I'm going to, in fact, just install the server by typing in sudo apt-get install OpenSSH-server. It's going to ask for the password for sudo. Goes through, finds the package, prompts me to install it. I hit enter to agree to yes. It's a pretty quick install, and it's simply running as soon as you're done. So right now SSH is running and it's listening and awaiting connections. Prior to doing this, making sure you have really good secure passwords on all your accounts is very, very important, because it is available right now. Anybody that is on the network or can remotely access this by any means, if they make a SSH connection, all they need is the username and password. So if it's a simple password or no password, they'd have direct access to your system right now. Prior to opening this up, there really was no external way of accessing your server. Ubuntu server is very, very stripped down. It doesn't have any services installed, or very, very, very few services installed by default. Anything you want to add has to be added, such as firewalls or extra security. So now you've just opened up SSH so anybody can access it. We'll take a look at the client side. And switch over the client, and I'll log on to my client computer. And it does say install the client software as well. It is already installed, but I'll walk you through the steps anyway in case you got to a client that was not installed. Ubuntu 12.04 desktop version does include it for us for our advantage. To get to this, we do want to, we could go through the Ubuntu Software Center, just keeping with the practice of typing command line commands using the terminal. We'll go that same route. I want to go up to the dash home up on the top. If you can't see this, by the way, you can scroll or roll up and down to get to there. Dash home. Terminal is one of the most recent applications that I did run. If it's not on that list, all I have to do is click in the search area and just type in terminal, and it'll bring up the terminal applications that are related. I click on terminal, and now I can go and install the client. Sudo apt-get install open SSH-client. It's going to ask for the password for Paul B to equivalent to sudo. It's password. It already tells me that it's installed. Again, that's one of the biggest difference between the server and the desktop software is the desktop includes all kinds of applications and services already built in, make it really, really easy for people to use. Everything's just there. The server, to make it the most efficient as possible, it does not include anything. If we need to add something, even the editors, we looked at Emacs and Vim last week, that we need to edit that as well. Knowing that's connected, that's already installed, now we can go ahead and try to connect to that server. Two things we need to know is we need to know a username and the server name if we were using DNS. We're not using DNS in this situation, so we actually need to know the server's IP address. So we need to know the username on that machine and the IP of the address of that machine. We can do that by going to the server itself. Most cases when we work with servers, they have static IP addresses. You probably have them documented somewhere, and you just go ahead and look at what is that server's IP address. This is using DHCP, and so we could be getting different IP addresses on our server, so we're going to take a look and see what our IP address is on our server right now. I type in ifconfig, and this is telling me that it is 192.168.230.132. So that's the machine I want to connect. That's the IP address to this machine that I want to connect to. I switch back over to my desktop, and I use the SSH command, SSH, and I want to just connect as a user. The user on that machine is Paul B. And then we use the @sign, and then we use the IP address or the computer name. We'll use the IP address of 192.168.230.132. It's going to tell me that the authenticity of this host can't be established. It's the same thing when you go to a web page of some of the servers that we're working with. It says that it can't be entrusted, there's no security certificate or whatever. It's really the same lines here. We don't have a security certificate for the server. It's telling you that and basically telling you, are you sure you want to continue anyways? Yes, I do. So I type out yes, since neither of those are the defaults. So I type out yes, I do want to connect anyway. It tells me that it's been added to the list of known hosts. Now it's asking me for the password on that machine, Paul B's password on that machine. It happens to be password, so I type in password. I am now on that computer. You can tell that. I should have named these a little bit differently when I named the machines themselves, but this Paul B account is on a machine called Paul B Virtual Machine, which is my Windows desktop. I'm sorry, my Ubuntu desktop. So that's right here. So this is the machine. I did an SSH connection to a different machine, and now it's telling me that I'm connected to this machine, Ubuntu Paul B. That is my server. If I click on my Ubuntu server, that is the actual name on the servers. Ubuntu-Paul B is my Ubuntu server name. Again, probably different naming would have been better. So hope that's not too confusing. I can also see that that is this machine now, that this is a terminal connection to that machine. All the processing happens on that machine, but I can issue any command, such as ifconfig. I do ifconfig, and I can see that this machine's IP address is 230.132. Well, that would have to be the server, because that's the server I have right here, the IP address I have right here. This is not a remote control. This is not remotely accessing the console screen, where as I type commands in here, that they show up on the console over here. That's not true at all. There are two different sessions right now onto the server they're accessing at the same time. Anything I do here, if I install something, it's obviously going to be installed in the server, but you just won't see it running or being installed here. That's why we use the command lines so often for connections such as SSH. SSH is only a command line interface, or text-based, I should say, interface. You can't have any graphics going through here. So knowing commands such as sudo apt get install whatever you want to do will be very important to know to install applications. So you can get ifconfig, you can change the IP addresses into whatever configuration you want as well. Again, all these commands are being issued on the server, and the server is actually running them. I could, from right here, do a sudo apt get upgrade, and that would upgrade the server. It'd be running on the server again and doing the upgrade. I could close this terminal window and let it finish up in the background if I wanted to do something like that. I could connect to multiple computers at the same time, having multiple terminal windows open. They are all separate connections. There are some advantages or some other options you can use for installing applications. The sudo task select does bring us up the graphical interface for installing packages. It's a text-based graphical interface, but it does give us something to work with. Not a full graphical interface. I do have a mouse here, but I can't click on anything. Everything is keyboard driven. As you can see, right up on top, Open SSH Server is already checked. We just installed that by doing the sudo apt get. We could have just as easily done a task select and chosen this for Open SSH and then clicked OK as well. So a couple of different ways of accessing things. Anything that is, I just hit the escape key to get out of there. So anything that can be done text-based menu or command line can be done through here. To disconnect, you should be able to hit the tilde sign, and if you see the tilde, it's not going to work. They're called escape commands or escape menus, and they're all based on the tilde. So tilde something is going to do something or another. The command for exiting is the escape command, period. But again, if you ever see the tilde, like in this case, it's showing up the tilde 0, it's just not working right. So let me try it again. Shift, no. And not sure why it's working sometimes and not other times. We had the same issue in class where all of a sudden it started working. The other way to disconnect from this server is just to type exit. Now, being careful of where you are, being very aware of you are, the Ubuntu Paul B is my server, and this is an SSH connection to that server. So I'm using secure shell to access my server. I type in exit and I hit enter, and it closed that connection. I'm no longer in an SSH connection, so if I type exit again, it's going to close the window. There's nothing to disconnect from, and so it's going to close the window. So you can use the exit command to close a secure shell session and then to close the terminal window itself. Let me try to get the command period or the escape period to work again. Let's go to terminal. So SSH, I'm logging in as Paul B at 192.168.230.132. The password is password. I think I mistyped. Try it again, and I'm connected. Shift tilde. Now this would probably work because I did the shift tilde and nothing showed up. As soon as I hit the period, it disconnects. So in that case, it did work. So if you hold on the shift and hit the tilde and nothing shows up, then the escape sequence will work, and then hit period will exit. Let me try connecting again. And so now I'm connected. I can do a command, ls. I can change directories. And now let me do the shift, go to tilde, nothing showed up, and then when I hit the period, it closes. So now it's working fine again. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'll connect. I am connected now, and exit will always work. There just are other secure shell escape sequences or escape commands. So having that tilde work properly may be important for later on. For what we're doing, we're connecting and disconnecting. That's it. So we really don't need to worry about it too much. We can access it. We can execute our commands. We can delete directories, make directories, install applications, remove applications, check the IP address, do whatever configurations we can do through a command line interface, and then we can just simply disconnect either through the asterisk, the tilde dot, or typing in exit. Exiting again closes my terminal. The next part of our document talks about some of the settings that you can work with in SSH, such as changing your your TCP port to 2222 instead of 22, using public keys, whatever you want to be doing. And again, we're not going to be covering that today. Just being able to make that connection is the most important thing. Moving on down, the next thing they talk about in the chapter is Puppet. Puppet's a cross-platform framework enabling system administrators to perform common tasks using code. The code can do a variety of tasks. It too has a client side and a server side. The client is just called Puppet, so sudo apt-get install Puppet. And then the server side, it's Puppet Master, sudo apt-get install Puppet Master. It's a very, very quick and easy install, very similar to SSH. Doesn't take very long at all. It's very small and not a whole lot to configure. It's just sort of there running. The biggest difference is that you don't connect and issue command line commands. What you end up doing is using code, and you're developing files, .pp files. It's actually coding it. You are doing a script or some kind of programming that's in there. And what Puppet does is execute those. What you can do with that then is, well, here. Perform common tasks using this code. They can do a variety of tasks such as installing new software, checking file permissions, or updating user accounts. So it's pre-written code or things that you do most likely on an ongoing basis where you want to change something. Often it's easier just to install or remove something from the command line, and that's what we've been working with so far. The last section in this chapter is talk about a product called Zential. Not exactly sure of the pronunciation. Zential, it seems like it's out of Europe, possibly out of Spain, but it is directly lays on top of Ubuntu server. There's all kinds of extensions on there and packages that we can go take a look at. It is really a full-scale small business server. It can be configured as a gateway, kind of like a router that's going to manage your traffic going in and out. Infrastructure, unified threat manager, which is your intruder detection, your antivirus. It's an office server for file and print serving, giving a directory service using LDAP, just like or similar to eDirectory, Novell, and Active Directory in Windows. Unified communications, which is your instant messaging, your email, voice over IP, or any combination of them. The services are managed by Zential. They're tightly integrated, and most tasks are automated. What's nice about that, it helps reduce errors and disconfiguration. When you're applying all the packages individually, like we're doing in the class, we sort of have to get everything to work all together and making sure that one doesn't conflict with the other, or how do I get the different services to run together. There is a free, this is free. You can upgrade to supported versions, which with updates and security packs, and then also mainly for the actual service and support for a couple different levels for various pricing. You can check out the website. It's zential.org. The chapter talks about Zential 2.3, and it's part of the Ubuntu 12.0 for Universal repositories, and so therefore we can just install any packages that we want. There are several sections of this, and these are the actual packages, and they would have to be installed separately if we install Ubuntu Server first and then want to add the packages later. So just taking a look at this, if I wanted to do the Zential core, I'd have to do a sudo apt-get install Zential core, then do the Zential common, and then that's just the system itself. If you wanted network management, then you add the network module, the objects and services, NTP or firewall, DHCP, DNS, and so the list goes on. OpenVPN, the users is a separate module, so you really have to, pretty much add all of these different components or packages on. A new release just came out, and this is version 2.3 that they talk about in the documentation, but a new version came out, and it's 3.0. In fact, let me just go to that site real quick. Here's Zential's site. Just like I read, it can act as any of these type of services. One single easy-to-use platform to manage all your network services. If I go to the documentation and I go to doc.zential.org and look at the installation process, it says, generally speaking, Zential is meant to be installed exclusively on one machine. However, this does not prevent you from installing other applications that are not managed through the Zential interface. They would have to be installed and configured separately. So Zential only configures and manages its modules through its interface. It runs on top of Ubuntu Server, always on the long-term support versions. Therefore, it's going to work on 12.04. The last time would be 10.04, and then every 2 years is when Ubuntu comes out with the long-term support. So we're on the 12.04. The next one would be 14.04. Two ways of installing Zential. One way is using the Zential installer, and the other is using the existing Ubuntu Server Edition and then adding packages onto it. And that's what the manual is talking about, is you have the existing Server Edition and you want to install all those packages. The additional way is using the installer. Now, I do have a download of it. You can download it as well under downloads, but if you are on campus and you can get to school, it's on a thumb drive here in the classroom, or by going out to the shared drive where we got the other documents to begin with. It's 172, 16, 190, 20. I can click on class, and then Linux. By the way, this is under a computer. It's not under, you can't web browse this. And then Linux 2, and Zential. This is a 32-bit edition. It's just to get us logged in and created and see what it looks like. The activity for today, for this week, is just to install it, and actually only halfway, just to do the basic install. When we come back and restart the machine, it'll come back and ask us for what modules we want to install. We're not going to be doing anything at that point. We'll be looking at it more next week as far as what services and roles they can play. But this is the file we're looking for. And what that is an ISO image of basically Ubuntu Server that's been customized for Zential. So it has all of their packages already pre-installed. It has a desktop software already installed, so it's a graphical user interface. It's just doing everything we normally would do, except it's already pre-done for you in one package. So we're going to go ahead and install a new version, a new virtual machine with that ZenTL software on it. And I click New Virtual Machine, and use all the basic options that we have in the past. And I do want to make sure that this is Linux and Ubuntu. ZenTL is Ubuntu with services on top of it. If you've taken the Novell class, it'd be similar to Open Enterprise Server is services that's running on top of the NetWare operating system. I click Next on Ubuntu. The machine name, I'm going to call it ZenTL. Yeah, let's call it ZenTL. And I'm going to put it with the rest of my virtual machines under Linux 2. And I'll make a new folder called ZenTL. And I'll put a 2 behind it since I already have a ZenTL directory. But that's what I'm going to call it. And I click Next. One processor is fine. Since I have the memory available, I only need 1 gig. I'm going to put it up to 2 though. Click Next. I'm going to keep it network address translation, just like I have my other server and client. And Next, and Next. Create a new virtual disk, SCSI. This is the only change that I'm going to make. This is purely personal, whether you have this as multiple files or a single file. Click Next, Next, and Finish. I'm going to switch my CD-ROM. Right now I built my machine, a 2 gigs of RAM, 20 gig hard drive, single processor, and now I'm going to insert the CD for ZenTL into my computer. I click on CD, double click on CD, click on the ISO, use an ISO image, browse for the ISO image. I go to my class files and choose ZenTL and click Open. And OK. So now that disk is in that drive. I power on the machine. It's going to look very similar to the Ubuntu installation because it is Ubuntu, just with a few additions to it. Everything is arrow-based and keyboard-based. It's almost all defaults, though. I hit Enter in English. Install ZenTL, delete all the disks. Yep, I hit Enter in there. English again, United States. No, I don't want it to detect my keyboard automatically. It is an English keyboard layout, and it starts the install. It comes up to the prompt for the host name. I will keep ZenTL on there. I'll add my name at the end of it, so I'll put a dash Paul B, ZenTL Paul B, and hit continue. The username for your account on this machine, keeping with my standard, just keeping Paul B for now, and the password of password. It figures out that I'm in America in Chicago time zone. Yes. and it does this large file copy and installation. After several minutes of installing and configuring all the packages that it wants to do, it'll come up to the final screen, finish the installation. Make sure to remove your installation CD. So I'm going to do that. Go to VM, Settings, go to my CD-ROM, double click on it. I'm going to switch this back to using a physical disk and not even have it connected. I really don't have a need for it, so I'm going to click Not Connect and Power On. Click OK. Click back in the window and hit Enter to continue. On the bottom it says install Ubuntu as you would on a physical computer, then click I am finished when you're done, so install VMware Tools. We're going to do it differently next week, so we're just going to close that. Because there's more packages installed and it's configuring its first time through, it's a little bit slower than the base Ubuntu server, which really doesn't have any services or any configurations going on when you start booting up the computer. It takes several minutes to install the rest of its packages during the first boot here. What you're really in here right now, though, is Firefox web browser. This is the default window that it will come up to for administration. Later on, when we do administration, we'll really be launching Firefox, which will bring up this local tool. We don't need to log on to here. I can just close Firefox. And when I do, it gives me a desktop. I do have to scroll to get to the bottom of the screen, otherwise you won't see it. And down the lower right-hand corner is the power switch for here. If you don't see that, you do have your consoles, your terminals, which you can do your shutdown commands from there. But if you do scroll down a little bit, you see the power button. This is as far as I need you to go right now. This is, again, just probably half the installation process. It gets you up. We then go in and configure the server to be what type of server. Do we want it to be an office server, an infrastructure server, or a gateway server, what we want to do. And we'll talk more about that next week or the weeks following, depending on what our topics are going to be. For right now, I just want to turn this off. If I hit the power button, it tells me to shut down, and it will shut down. That's just an introduction to there, and we will cover that more. The last thing I do want to cover today is something that's not in the manual and is really not supported by Ubuntu anymore. They have dropped support for it. There's some conflicts or potential issues, but because it's so popular, and you probably will run into it somewhere along the lines if you work with something with Linux, I'm going to introduce this to you. It's also going to be valuable to you in the sense that it's going to review several of the things that we've worked with so far, repository lists, several command line commands, and so it should hopefully be valuable to you. In order to install webmin, we install it on the server, on our Ubuntu server, our regular Ubuntu server. Let's get back up here. I need to, since it's not supported, it's not in any of the Ubuntu repositories. So we need to add the repository where we can find this webmin package. To do that, we're going to edit the sources.list file. So we type in sudo vim, and then the file we want to edit is etc apt sources.list. Make sure you include the first / before the etc. That tells us to start looking from the root. It's going to ask me for the password for Paul B, since I'm running sudo, and it should bring you up to a file like this. If you don't see this file, or if it's creating a new file, then you probably typed something wrong. So again, check the typing very clearly. By the way, the next several steps that I'll be showing here will also be in the learning plan, since they are very detailed and very specific commands and, again, very specific things to type. and without having to pause the video and grab that whole detailed thing of trying to watch on the screen, you can get the specific things to type in from the learning plan. So take a look there. I do want to append to this file. So right now I can't do anything until I hit the A for append. At the bottom of the screen, it now shows insert. So now I can insert additional text. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, hit the end key, so I can be at the end of the bottom row and hit enter. So I create a new line. So now I have a new line. I need to add 2 lines here, so I'm really adding 2 repositories to our sources list. It's a Debian package, and it'll be located at http://download.webmin.com, and then download directory, repository, and that's the directory. And then we do sarge and contrib. That's our first line. The second package repository, that we're going to add is a mirror site. So it's webmin.mirror.somersettechsolutions.co.uk. So that's the site, and it is in the repository directory. Again, we do sarge and contrib. So let's check this real quick. Download webmin.com, download repository, and webmin.mirror.somersettechsolutions.co.uk repository. Now I want to save this file, so I want to get out of the insert mode or the append mode. I hit the escape key. Once I do that, that goes away. Now I can do my colon commands. I do :W to write the file. It just told me that it was written. And I can do the :Q to quit. Now it's quit. I will also need to get a PGP key. It's basically to authenticate those repositories, making sure that's safe. I will get that, wget, so I'm copying a file. I'm going to download a file from www.webmin.com, and the key that I'm going to be downloading is jcameron-key, and the file extension is ASC. And it just downloaded, just saved it to my computer. I'm going to use another apt command, but this case it's going to be an apt key. It's adding a key, apt key add. Now which key are you going to add? You're going to add the Cameron key.asc file. And it just added that key. So it just authenticated that and made it so it should like that. Now I just updated my list of repositories on a simple list. Now I need to tell the system that I updated that list. So I need to do the sudo apt-get update command. That's going to go through, look at all the repositories, let Ubuntu know what's available in all those different places. If you have a typo or you did something wrong at the bottom of that list, it would tell you what the problem is, and it didn't. A lot of times, again, if you have a typo, if you spelled download wrong or repository wrong, it would say, I can't find it. And then you have to know you have to go back and change it, then come back here and do an update again. I didn't get any errors, so that should be good. So now that the repository is all set, I can actually install it. Sudo apt-get install, and it's webmin for web administration. It found the package. It wants to install it. It's 134 meg. I hit yes, enter, choose yes. And let it do its install. When you come back to your prompt, paulb at ubuntu-paulb, it tells you right before that webmin install complete. You can now log on using HTTPS. You do have to use the S, it's a secure connection. And that gives you the name Ubuntu paulb because that is the machine name. Again, because I'm not using DNS, we're going to need to substitute the IP address for that. The next part that's important is the colon 10,000. That is the port it's going to be using, and we do have to enter that. So we're going to log in as root with your root password, or any other user you can use sudo to run the command as root. So we're going to switch over to our desktop and type password for my desktop. Now this is a web administrative, a graphical web administration, and it's web-based, and so I need to use a web browser for this. I go to the web browser. Up in the address line, I use https://. Now again, it asks you for the server name. We're going to use the server IP address, 192.168.230.132, colon 10,000. When I go to there, it actually made the connection. That's a good sign, so it doesn't say that the site's not found. If it says it can't be found, go back and double check your server's IP address and make sure that you type that in correctly. Also make sure you have the S for a secure connection. It does say that this connection is untrusted. We don't have the security certificate for it. Normally it would say, get me out of here. I don't want to go there. I understand the risks because I just installed it. By clicking on understand the risks and scrolling down, it wants me to add that as an exception. So I add this exception. I'm going to include this, and I'm going to confirm the security exception, and I'm permanently going to store this exception so it shouldn't pop up anymore. This would be the normal login if I didn't have the security issue. So it just says, hey, you're going to remotely administer through the web this server, 192.168.230.132. We don't have a root account in Ubuntu. Ubuntu disables those. We do have the accounts that we made, which are part of the sudo group, and the username is paulb and password. I do not recommend you to remember the login permanently. If you do, anybody walking up this machine would be able to go to the web browser and access it. I click log on. So that was on the webmin software. It asks you to save the password. Then Firefox wants to save the password. Do you want to remember it? Or you can do a drop down, not now or never. And I would strongly suggest that you never remember the password for this site. That again, you'd have to type it in each time. This now gives you access to the system. It shows you your amount of your CPU usage, your real memory, your virtual memory, local disk space. Again, it's just not fitting on the screen very well, so we have to scroll around a little bit. If I click on a webmin, I can the log. I can look at the users and just take a look around and just see what you can do. Under system, I can do boot up and shut down. So I can, start up services, turn services on and off. I can change the password of, different accounts here. I can even look at the file system and navigate through the boot directory or the run directory, and so on. File system backup, schedule commands, users and groups. Here's my paulb account that I'm logging in as. I can see what my home directory is and taking a look at that. We'll be covering more user accounts later on in the semester, but this is just showing it. Servers, right now the only server that's installed is an SSH server. We just configured that in fact right now. And here's where you can see the configuration or whatever options I want to be putting under here as well. As we add other servers, FTP servers or print servers, those will show up here as well. Under networking, network configuration, I can look at the interfaces, the routers and gateways. So there's a lot of configurations, things that we would normally do through the command line that we can now do graphically through the web-based. A couple concerns. One is that it's not supported. Ubuntu 12 says there's just some incompatibilities or something we don't like about it, or not exactly sure the details. I believe I was reading that that Ubuntu didn't like the way that Webmin was doing its package management, and therefore, took away those services and said we're not going to support you anymore. It could be also that the Webmin really sits on top of Ubuntu, and as you click on these things, these are just a program running on top, and as you make, especially system type changes, maybe, I don't know, let's see, what would be a system type change? Well, maybe even like network configuration, the network interfaces. As you make the changes here, once you apply the configuration, it will then go out to Ubuntu and update those configuration files, and as if you are using them to go in and edit all those configuration files. So there may be some compatibilities. I've read some places that people using Webmin can, corrupt those files or overwrite areas that shouldn't be overwritten or whatever. But because this is so popular and so many people still do use it, or at least have referred to it, it's good to have your experience, at least, seeing what's there. So the activities are to install Webmin and just glance around and check at different aspects of it. Check at the the hardware, look at your drives, look under networking, look under some of the system things, the file management, the user accounts, and see what you can do. I wouldn't suggest changing anything. You can always cancel all the screens, and nothing really takes effect until you click apply. And that's what we've written to the file. So even if you get somewhere, even in worst cases, I'm not sure what's going on, it is just a web browser, you can close Firefox completely to avoid that. Installing Zential would be recommended as well. We will be talking about that in the next couple of weeks as we talk about other services. We'll see how they implement it, as well as just some user management and remote management. That too is all completely web-based, just like we're looking at here. We're using Firefox to administer it. We saw that on the Zential server, that we were administering it through a local Firefox instance. We can remotely access it also through a remote Firefox instance. It doesn't have to be in the local machine. So again, most of these notes, the specifics as far as how to get to the different places, are going to be out there on the learning plan, so take a look out there. One final note that I have is, especially when working with Webmin, it does require Java, and depending on if Java is already installed in your system or not, you may come to some of these screens and it'll say that I need Java to view that. I'm just going to show this real quickly. It's not critical. Right now it looks like it's installed. A couple of the machines that I was working on, it did not appear to be installed. There is the commercial version of Java that's available. You can go out to java.com, and when you say download, it will bring you down to the Linux downloads for Java. The Ubuntu people and the rest of the open source world aren't really happy with Java right now, because they were actually, well, I shouldn't say with Java, they love Java, but Oracle bought Sun, and some of the stuff that Oracle has done to the open source community has not gone well. So if you want to install an open source version of Java, they have given you this one. So going to a terminal, you can do a sudo apt-get install. And the open source Java is OpenJDK for a Java development kit. It is version 7, just like the regular Javas right now, and then JRE for the Java runtime environment. It asks me for the sudo password. Does it want to install? Hit enter for yes. It downloads and installs it. So this, if you do not have Java, this is the one that they recommend. It is an open source Java equivalent, and you can get that from the OpenJDK-7-JRE package. That is all that I have. If you have any questions or comments, please contact me. Otherwise, we'll be continuing on with some remote management things next week, as well as probably getting into account administration and directory access.